Hello and welcome to this morning's lesson, which is part of my series on helping A-level students to write in a more sophisticated way and to make that jump from GCSE to A-level study. And today's lesson is about using tentative or using assertive language in an essay and knowing which one to use at which time and when it's appropriate to do that. And this can be really helpful if you're making an argument in an essay, because sometimes you want to just suggest an idea and explore that idea, and sometimes you want to be quite assertive and say, this is my opinion, this is my argument, this is what I've concluded. So what I mean by tentative and assertive language is that tentative language is suggesting, it's hinting, it's positing an idea. So we might think of things like it could be argued that. You might use some modal verbs, so may, could, might. Your modal verbs are really powerful and shouldn't be forgotten when you're writing an essay. You could say it is, or it could be suggested that. One might argue is a good one. Potentially, so using your adverbs at the start of your sentence could be really powerful. So potentially, possibly, etc. And then using some really powerful analytical verbs as well. So hint, suggest, communicate, and so on. So these words could be a word bank as a tentative argument is being made. It could be argued that Othello dominates at the start of the play. It could be argued that Shakespeare wants to present Othello in this way because one might suggest that, so putting ideas forward and then exploring them and deciding which ones you agree with. And then when you agree with those arguments, you need to use your assertive language. So ultimately is a really nice one. Especially finishing your essay. Ultimately, Othello's downfall is caused by his own insecurities rather than the power of external forces. Definitely is another adverb that you might use. And then just linking across our modal verbs here, instead of may, would, might, you're going to be using is, will. So words that show that something is absolutely 100% definite. In conclusion is quite a nice one. Having evaluated the evidence. I believe that is another good one. Now, this is interesting because quite a lot of people think that if you're doing academic writing, particularly in English literature, you don't use the personal pronoun. And what you do is actually what I've got over here, which is say, one might or it could be suggested. So using the passive voice instead of the active voice. What I think is really useful is to use that active voice. So I think this, I believe this, in my opinion, when you really want to emphasize that this is your line of argument. So personally, I wouldn't use the pronoun I all the way through my essay, but I would use it at those moments when it really matters that I want to assert my point of view on a particular text. Okay, so we've got a bit of a word bank going on here. We've made a start at that. And now what I'm going to do is show you some examples that I prepared earlier, Blue Peter style, in order to help us see how this might actually look in an essay. Okay, so my first example up here is from The Kite Runner. I don't know if you've read The Kite Runner. It's an absolutely phenomenal novel, which is on the AQA A-level course. It's set in Afghanistan and then partly in the USA. And part of the novel is about the conflict between Afghan culture and American culture. So many of the characters migrate from Afghanistan to America and they struggle to integrate into this new culture. And one of the characters who struggles with that is called Soraya. So if we look at this first example, Soraya's predicament may reflect the conflict between Afghan and American culture, as well as the restrictions placed on women in a patriarchal society. So is this tentative or is it assertive? Well, if we look at this word here, the modal verb, may, indicates that it's quite a tentative suggestion. It's possible that this reflects the conflict. Now, the thing that you need to ask yourself when you're writing your essays is, do I want to be tentative or do I want to be assertive? So if we look closely at this example, is this the right verb to use, or should I be more assertive? So Soraya's predicament may reflect the conflict between Afghan and American culture. Now, in my opinion, having read the novel, having taught the novel in depth to my A-level classes, I actually think that we should be assertive here, because it's pretty clear in the novel that this is what the writer is communicating. So I'm going to change that modal verb. I'm actually just going to take it out completely and just say reflects, because I want to be a little bit more assertive there in my line of argument. You know, it's very difficult to question that opinion. If we look at the second example then, so here we're looking at the character of Amir from The Kite Runner. And Amir, I'm not going to spoil the plot for you in case you haven't read it or seen the film, but Amir makes a huge mistake when he's a child, which has big consequences for the people that he's really close to. And part of the novel is about him accepting the mistake that he's made, but also trying to redeem himself and trying to fix that mistake. So if we have a look at this example here, Amir's journey to the acceptance of his own guilt and culpability and his determination to redeem himself may provide a blueprint for the journey society needs to take. So again, we'll see that I've been really tentative here, and I've used that modal verb may. Now, why can I use it here, but actually I've decided that up here it's not a great idea? Well, here I'm suggesting something which isn't a definite concept in the novel. I changed this one because the novel shows that 100% Soraya's predicament is caused by the conflict between two cultures. Whereas here, I want to suggest an idea that I think could be evidence from the novel, but I'm not 100% sure. There may be other reasons why Amir goes on that journey of redemption through the text. So when you want to suggest, hint, give a whole range of different possibilities, you would be using that tentative language. I think if this was a conclusion, I might be a little bit more assertive, and I might say, having looked at all the evidence and explored all of the ideas, yep, I'm going to be more assertive, and I'd take the may out and I'd just say that it provides a blueprint. Okay, moving on to a different text then for our next example. Here, this is about Death of a Salesman, which is a wonderful play by Arthur Miller. Again, I study it with my A-level classes, and I'm sure lots of you are familiar with it. So if we have a look at this one, you'll see that I've started off with really tentative language. So it is arguable that. So I'm suggesting an idea here, I'm not 100% sure of it. So it's arguable that Willie's death reveals the insidious power of capitalism holds over the individual. The final tragic moment of the play is, and notice that verb there, is that Willie dies without any clear realisation of how profoundly he has been deceived by capitalism. So here I'm kind of moving between my tentative and my assertive language. So in the first one, I'm saying that this is a possibility, and then in the second part of my sentence I'm saying that this is the case. Now, again, it depends what part of the essay you're writing. If this was a paragraph exploring the evidence and I hadn't made my conclusions, I'd say, yeah, it is arguable that that's absolutely fine. If this was my conclusion and I'd evaluated all of that evidence and I thought, actually, yes, I'm sure of this point of view, this is what my argument is, I'd probably change this to be a little bit more assertive. So I'd probably get rid of that and put ultimately in there and leave that is to be quite assertive. Okay, the final example then I've taken from Why I Took SOC. And what we're doing here is evaluating critical concepts at the same time as using tentative and assertive language. So if we have a look here, whilst it could be argued, so notice that tentative language, particularly that modal verb could, whilst it could be argued that Antoinette is a passive victim of the patriarchy, it is more convincing to consider. And notice that assertive language there, it is more convincing. So what's going on here is that in the first half of my sentence, I've taken this critical opinion, Antoinette could be considered a passive victim, and I'm saying, yeah, tentatively, there's some evidence for that, that's okay, that is a point of view that is valid. But what I'm doing here is then changing that and saying, in my own argument, I'm asserting that actually I want to look at Antoinette in a different way. So I'm taking that critical opinion and suggesting it tentatively, but then I'm using my assertive language to say that actually my line of argument is actually this. Okay, I hope that video is useful for you, and make sure you watch the rest of the playlist on how to write using academic language.